Welcome to the show. I'm Janessa Finley Ford, equal parts coach, healer, leadership strategist, and curious student of what makes us brilliantly human. I love psychology and neuroscience almost as much as I love a good laugh at myself because let's be real, mastering the art of being human requires a healthy dose of humor. My work guides women out of the stress leadership paradigm and into self-mastery, a level of self-mastery that creates calm, confidence, and influential presence. And at the end of the day, it changes families, teams, and organizations. I don't teach from a pedestal, though. I teach from practice, and I have the bruises, the breakthroughs, and the stories that show it. Thankfully, I get to have these conversations with one of my favorite humans. So let's meet the other voice behind the mission.
Hi, everybody. I'm SJ. I'm a results-driven leader who leads with conviction and strength, setting an unapologetic standard of excellence. Build high-trust communities where candor and accountability forge dependable leaders. And as a certified crystal healer and shamanic earth and energy medicine practitioner, I blend science, spirit, and strategy together to rewire energetic patterns for peace, potency, and purpose.
So, have you ever worked with someone who made you question your own sanity? Not because they were wrong, but because they did everything completely differently than you. One of you wants the plan before taking the first step, and the other wants to take the first step so the plan can unfold and reveal itself. One thrives on structure, and the other thrives on possibility. One calls it discipline, and the other calls it freedom. Somewhere along the way, you both become convinced the other person is the problem or complicated or slowing things down or making it hard. And today's conversation is deeply personal because this is a very similar dynamic. I feel like what I just explained, one is SJ's perspective and approach, and the other is mine. And this month, as we explore the law of rhythm, one of the greatest misconceptions about flow is that it's something that you find. And we're going to talk about it from a different angle, that it's something you stop interrupting. The unseen force at play is the rhythm. Every person has a natural cadence, a way they process, create, decide, communicate, and the way that they move through life that allows their nervous system to function at its very best. And when we don't recognize that rhythm in someone else, we unconsciously impose our own onto everyone around us. How does this show up in the scene? Frustration that feels personal, projects that stall for reasons that you just can't quite explain or put your finger on, meetings that drain more energy than they will ever create, partnerships where both people are working really hard, yet somehow you're just getting in each other's way. For SJ and I, it looked like an Enneagram 7 trying to build one vision with two very different rhythms. Without realizing it, we were pulling each other out of flow while both believed we were helping. And the breakthrough wasn't learning how to work harder together. It was learning how to honor the intelligence of each other's design. It was learning to see the strengths that we each had and allowing ourselves to delegate to honor those strengths. Because leadership isn't about creating one rhythm that everyone has to follow. It's creating an environment where the different rhythms can work together without one overpowering the other. So today we're going to be sharing the messy moments, the conversations, the practical shifts, and the way that we transform not only our partnership, but the very foundation of how we build stronger together. Because when people are free to lead from their authentic rhythm, flow stops being something that you chase and it becomes the culture you create. So let's open our eyes. SJ, where do you want to dive into this conversation?
I don't know. We can start with like one of the things that was most difficult for me in the beginning was all of planning, the planning and the structure and the having the details all ironed out and what we were going to do. And it was also like the amount of planning, right? Because it wasn't necessarily just the upcoming event. It was what are we doing this month? And then like what does the year look like? And in my flow, like I don't even really necessarily typically know what tomorrow looks like typically. So I'm much more of a wing it style of person. So trying to figure out how to be creative, not winging it, and in a structured setting, right? Of like, we're talking about this in this next hour. So have all of those creative things come to me within that structured hour. That's not really how I do life at all. So that was difficult for me to figure out how to get into that flow with those things. So I would say that for me was the one thing that stood out the most from the beginning was how much structure I lacked and how much felt comfortable in your sphere.
Oh, yeah. With your approach to life, I really had to embrace trust. I mean, to the level with Stronger Together now, where it is you prepare what comes through for you, I do the same, and somehow they always blend and complement. And to me, this was like a far out wild concept when we first started working together that would not be nearly as perfect if we weren't involved in the pre-planning beforehand. And so partnering with you really stretched me in having a greater trust, which I absolutely needed for the spiritual side of life, to let go of the reins and not feel like everything had to be done beforehand. Now, also, let's say though that for an Enneagram 1, to a certain extent, there is the ability to allow myself to be in flow. But even in this conversation, I've reflected on some of the biggest points that I feel like would serve the people tuning in and listening today. And then letting that just be kind of the left lane, right lane, and whatever comes through in the time about those points or in the conversation, maybe those points aren't even going to be where this conversation goes today. But I put my intention into it and then I let go and I have to trust where before, if I would just be like, okay, I'm going to do the Enneagram 7, I'm just going to wing it and I'm not going to make there be structure so that there's a greater level of comfort for SJ and embracing her approach, not forcing her constantly into mine. I would die quite a lot along the way and always be able to see like standard Enneagram 1 programming in hindsight where I have always improved and felt as though if I had spent a little preparing, my delivery would have been better. I would have been able to make my points articulated more clearly. I would have been able to clean up my language to explain what I was trying to communicate in a way that would land better, so on and so forth. So it's really been finding a happy medium and really growing into that spiritual trust while also learning, okay, I definitely feel most confident. And when we're confident, we come across differently. So, what level of preparation really actually needs to be done? And what level of trust for sure also need to relinquish to something greater than myself? For me personally, a blessing. But it was a little awkward in the upswing.
Yeah, and I think that was
I
something.
also am really,
uh,
go ahead.
no, go ahead. I think my audio is like skipping over here, so hopefully the recording is okay. Go ahead.
Reflecting, I am kind of shocked at the level that I knew you then, which is easy to say in hindsight. Like, we did not know each other very well, went into business, but it was never really a consideration. So, as they say, never go into business with or do business with your friends or whatever that saying is, because it's going to be complicated and messy. I think that it's also incredible to see what has grown from having so much faith and trust in being called into this partnership and just doing it without overthinking it. And how much we did have to grow in being each other's rhythm and each other's design along the way because we didn't know each other that well beforehand. It wasn't at all like I know you so well. I know we would do fantastic in business together. We were both ambitious. We felt called to something, and we're like, okay, we'll just figure it out as we go. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what we did. And I am so grateful for more than just the friendship, the sistership that's grown in this endeavor together. That, maybe it would have still grown if we hadn't done this, but I'm sure somewhere out there someone is saying that it would be a really bad idea to go into business with someone that you barely know, to partner with them at this level.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like reflecting on that, we talked about that when we met up this week too, of how we really didn't know each other in the grand scheme of things, of as far as like how do you run your business? Is your business legit even, right? Like we experienced each other's modalities. And I think that we experienced a lot of strides with each other's modalities and cracking through some things that we weren't able to crack through on our own, or even for that matter from a lot of our teachers and our mentors, like they weren't able to
Mhm.
crack some of the codes that the other was able to crack for us. So like we had experienced a sliver, I would say, of that, but certainly not to the depth that normally would call me to want to partner with someone. Also, like I'm definitely one of those people that on those like intro interview, fill out your personality test for a job, I'm a straight up lie when that question comes up of like, do you enjoy working in a team? Because my honest answer would typically, and for the most part, even today, would still be not really, unless I know who that team is, because my experience prior to Janessa with teams was I'm going to do all the work because somebody else is going to drop the ball, not, do it well enough, not ever do it. Like whatever is going to happen, it's going to still be left on my shoulders. So I'd actually prefer to just do it myself than have to depend on somebody else getting all of these things done. So I think for me, this was really the first time of experiencing how there was an equal and opposite team member that was going to put in as much effort, as much desire, as much heart into this endeavor. But I didn't know that necessarily when I went into business with you. I can reflect and remember that I was impressed with what you chose, like how thoughtful you were about your modalities or what you were doing, and also how it was also opposite. Like there was a lot of difference between us. And I liked that level of polarity because it stretched and it challenged me to look at things differently. Um, I think the aspect of the woo versus the more physical in nature, the more scientific based was an attraction for me as well. That was another item that you had done different things than what I had chosen to do. So it was so it wasn't like I was going into business with somebody who was same, right? I was going into business with somebody who was equally as potent, equally as successful in what they were doing, but in a completely different realm. So I felt like we could really bring something different to a community than what I had seen in other places. Because I've seen a lot of crystal healers partner together, I've seen a lot of shamanic energy practitioners partner together, but I hadn't seen varying modalities that were so in depth as what both you and I chose to do. Like we didn't choose to do a weekend certification to get a piece of paper that said we had a thing. Like we had actually chose paths that required us to get in the weeds, to go in depth, to go deeper than what a weekend or a week or honestly even probably a year practicum could have done for us. So that for me was one of the deciding points because, prior to that, I had tried to do business with an individual that was very surface level. And that was just not going to ever satisfy what I was trying to do.
Yeah, it's all of that is very true and how things were so complementary. But I also have to be honest, like in the beginning, before experiencing the things you're doing, I'm like, that isn't real.
Super judgy, like a good old Enneagram one. So judgy.
I may have been just a little skeptical, if we're being honest. So some of it was kind of like, I will believe it when I see it. And then I saw it. And that also helped me convert my thinking to, okay, so I will believe it and then I will see it. versus having to have the proof always. And I still remember one of the first times with, a bigger healing thread that we were going through. The modality that I had trained in specifically said with genetics. So the genetic work that you do, that is so freaking incredible. People should be rushing to sign up to be able to do this work with you. But you were like, yeah, it's no big deal. We're just going to heal that. And I had this whole belief system and this really in-depth training, like you just outlined. Like it wasn't just a weekend and it wasn't just a week, it wasn't even just a year. So it was quite a lot of training that had led me to believe that you can't do anything for that from an energetic or psychological standpoint. And I was like so skeptical, and you were just so steady and so grounded in your certainty and like, what is there to lose? We'll give it a try. And the results were fantastic. I'm not frazzled and blowing out my energy system all the time anymore. It was exactly like the one missing piece at that point in time that I hadn't been able to find yet. And so, I think a lot of, I mean, the bond, the respect, the things that have grown between us throughout the years have come from, expanding each other, stretching each other, but in this really gentle way. Like, I know I would feel more annoyance with myself in how I would pull you out of flow or slow down momentum than what I ever felt projected from you onto me. There was just always this safe space to um, shift when and where the shifts need to happen and not with force or expectation or anything that you often experience in relationships that make them so friction oriented or so uncomfortable. Um, so having that safe space has been such a huge, huge um, I don't know, part of the bond, the trust that I so quickly and easily built with you. There was never any sort of manipulation. Like, this would help the business, Janasa, if you would just quit X, Y, or Z. That's never been our approach with where we were getting tripped up. Typically, we would approach it with, okay, well, what balance needs to happen here? What mindset shift needs to happen here? Where do we create the alignment rather than pushing for one person to become more aligned with the other person? And I think that has made this not even just you and I, but what we guide people through and Stronger Together so beautiful and so powerful, because I really feel like it's relationships like these that so many people crave and yearn for and look for a very, very long time to find. Um, and, I can count all of the relationships that I had before you of this nature on probably one or two fingers, but they didn't, they weren't the relationships that were meant to last a long time. And so I think there's a lot of other people out there that share that type of experience where they yearn for relationships where they're accepted and the bond, connection, the trust comes natural versus really feeling like they are jumping off a cliff to place trust in someone at that level. And yeah, I feel like if we had not had that, the business partnership would have certainly suffered for it for probably a long time, if I'm being honest, just because we are wired in such opposite dynamics of how we approach life.
But just like you said, that there were aspects that I was strong in, there were aspects that you were strong in that I needed to gain capacity for as well, right? Like the structure, like one of the best things that has come out of Stronger Together, and certainly our friendship, is my week of oneness. Like, because I can't do more than a week. Like, no, I'll be too tired. Like I'll need 25 naps to be able to keep that pace for a whole month. But taking a week where I really am thoughtful with, this is the schedule, these are the items that I'm going to complete today, and being more of that Enneagram 1 list oriented. Now I don't schedule my day out by 15 minutes. Like that's not happening. But like, packing a plan of 4 to 5 things into that day that I commit to and actually follow through on has definitely changed the way that not just the business flows, but also the way my family life flows, like how the things do get done within that too. But definitely having that more thoughtful approach of plans are not terrible. Like we don't have to hate them all the time. And in fact, most people actually like to have some sort of plan or outline or knowing of what we're going to do rather than just getting a wild hair and by a whim just deciding to do X, Y, and Z with no sort of plan, no anything set in place has definitely changed the way that my family has functioned as well. And I'm sure that, the Enneagram 9 and 1 in my life appreciate a lot more stability. I think my 7 child can probably do life crazy with me and not have too much of a problem with it. However, one thing I wish I would have seen is commitment. Like, I wish I would have seen that I did lack commitment of actually completing tasks, finishing things out, closing them out. And honestly, I never had that modeled for me as a child either. I was raised by an Enneagram 7 and an Enneagram 6, and the 6 list and like all of that just killed any thought I may have ever had for wanting to have one of those because that was horrible. And the Enneagram 7 just lived life however, like whatever came, he did and, figure it out when we get there. So, like, that was the model that I had to where, in retrospect, had somebody modeled true commitment and completion energy for me, I think my life would have been far easier moving forward rather than here's 25 different things that I have started and they're like 70, 80, maybe 90% complete. And that like remaining 10%, I'm like, does the 10% really count? I mean, but in the grand scheme of things, yes, when you have the compound interest of now I have 57 of these things that are 90% complete, that it was actually overwhelming my neurology to have all of those things still be loose ends with no actual completion in sight for them to where now I understand that a lot of my runaway behavior or burn the bridge behavior was a neurology overload. Like I was overburdened, I was burnout, I had hit capacity a while ago, and I just didn't know how to articulate or think through or feel through all of the things that were coming up with that. So, I mean, that is something that this relationship and you specifically have taught me is how to complete the thing and also, a lot of times with the complete the thing is the acknowledging of the feelings and the emotions that come up with it, because that was a lot of my lingering out there was when I didn't want to have to complete whatever it was, the relationship, the task, because I felt depressed or sad or bored. God forbid bored, right? Because that one's rough. That was why I wasn't completing though, to where once I was able to learn and understand and feel that, you know what, the emotions can come and the world doesn't end when we acknowledge that they're there. I mean, I think it might have been this year, but at best last year when I could acknowledge fear that like I had never said fear or I'm afraid of as something that was coming up for me too. So just that increase of capacity from the emotional stance completely changed my life that I don't think if you hadn't entered my life, I would have ever hit that because prior emotions, like who needs those? Like that sounds terrible. They seem burdensome and like we don't really need them. Like we should just ignore them and they will go away. And that was detrimental to many areas of my life, not just relationships, but also to business, my career. I mean, since we met each other, promotions within my career come with little to no resistance in reality now because I have the capacity to see the full spectrum and to also actually complete the things rather than basically complete and then pass the ball to somebody else to finish that last boring 10%. So those aspects where I just lacked them, I don't think had I not had the friendship portion of this to where I trusted you with all of those aspects of me that I wouldn't be betrayed or shamed or harmed or seen as weak when I would say things like, my feelings are actually really hurt. Like, I'm hurt by this. I don't know that I would have ever gained the capacity to have that true full relationship either.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from my shoes with I kind of hear you talking about two different topics at at one time. And I would be so perplexed with like from an Enneagram 1 rave standpoint, like how is this task taking this long to get done? Not realizing that for you, the amount of flow that you have or space that you have in between things, and then for the inspiration to come, and for you to have your like week of oneness or your period of time where you get stuff done. For me, when we met, absolutely booked myself every 15 minutes. And so if something canceled or changed, there was a whole ripple effect. And that eventually got really stressful when business got
Mhm.
to a certain space where I didn't have the ability to adjust if somebody needed to adjust the schedule. And so in my world, very organized and scheduled, I'm like, you just do the thing. You just decide this is what I'm doing on this day and it just happens. And she's, really like incubating her magic to bring to it. And I didn't see the value in that at the time. Like, I don't want to say I didn't see any value in it, but I didn't understand because I'm so efficiency driven how the lack of efficiency could offset the value of the free flow of doing things. On the emotional side of stuff, I think it's been one of the most beautiful things to watch your personal development with and see it ripple into the professional world. I don't know how many times when we have our business meetings in public, and we're going through life together. I mean, there's been a wide variety of things that have been emotionally provoking and tearful, especially in my life, like a lot of trauma, a lot of sorrow, a lot of sadness and grief. And I remember the one time when you were working through some of your own stuff as we were talking, and you broke down and shed some tears. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I just didn't know how you were going to embrace it, but you finally were at that point with it where it didn't matter. You didn't care. Like it didn't matter if there were tears being shed in a public place and people just saw that. Like humans weep. It's part of life when you're doing life on the full spectrum of the experiences.
Mhm.
And that can sound like just a minute story, but when that translates into a community where you're leading people, what really was happening is this level of realness that you share with the world of yourself rather than protecting yourself or holding parts back of you. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that you bring to Stronger Together, but also into the government sector as well, is you are just like the real raw version of you. You speak your mind and with, respect, but very clear boundaries, very definitive understanding for people to have of where you stand on whatever topic. And before, when I first met you, the way in which you did it was more created space between people where now it fills that gap and people can actually relate to you and connect with you because you're giving them the real and the raw versus giving them a version of the real and the raw that they might be a little bit scared of. I don't know that scared is the right word, but I think it's funny.
I feel
So,
like it is for some people.
yeah, the Enneagram nines that don't want conflict. But yeah, I had to grow quite a little to move into a different linear timeline with the things that we were doing. And really for us, it seems like month to month is a really good flow. Like these are our goals for the month, and then letting go of not caring about when they're accomplished. Like they might not be done the next month when we meet either, but we have a check-in and we discuss the process or progress of it. And there isn't any tension around that anymore at all or any friction where before my efficiency and Enneagram oneness would definitely like kill the momentum because I'm like, well, these things should be done by now. On both ends. Like if I wasn't able to complete something, I was like just dousing myself in shame over it when it's not really necessary. And just in case anybody missed the intention of what I said about I used to schedule myself every 15 minutes, like that crap is whack and I don't do that anymore at all. Like we have lots of transition time built into the day. And we have also availability in the week to be able to be flexible and move things around and, like live like a sane person who isn't just a robot completing tasks all the time. So, yeah, all of these dynamics have really been wonderful to expand and grow and to see life done differently and see it be successful. That's the thing is so often we'll see it mirrored a different way and then try to do it ourselves the exact way someone else did it. And it doesn't work because it isn't our natural rhythm. But it was being able to really kind of study you in why it worked, like how, and it was more of your belief system underneath it, like things are always going to work out. That was a big one for me. And also like your money mindset of how there's just an abundance of everything. Like it was really looking at what are the beliefs underneath the behaviors that are making the behaviors successful. Because it was not just simply, oh, because she does it that way, I'm going to try doing it that way. And it's super awkward and absolutely so uncomfortable. Like I tried a day of sevenness and I hated it at the end. Like it was great all day long until I landed back in the real world that I still had all of these things to do. And none of them were done because I'd had a day fluttering about like Enneagram 7, doing whatever I felt like. And I didn't feel like doing any of the things. And then I'm like, well, my list is twice as long for tomorrow. And so again, it's like adjusting the timeline on a bigger plane than like 24 hours, for instance, makes these things successful, but also the belief system. And like I mentioned before, for me, a lot of it was trust. So
Mhm.
believing things are going to work out, trusting that space and time is going to be made to get them done and they'll be getting done on time. Maybe it's my own expectation or timeline that needs to adjust a little bit. But yeah, through every friction that we've had has come a lot of personal growth for me, and not a personal growth to tolerate a different approach, but to embrace the approach in the ways that are aligned for me to expand my capacity as well and bring that approach into my world.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest proof that your structure actually works and is useful is the way that you had us sit down and structure out the 12 months with the universal laws and the topics that we were going to do. Because at first, when you, for one, I was like, universal laws, like, oh God, like I'm gonna have to go study these because, like, I don't really know. Like, I have no idea. Like, I'm gonna be a stressed out Enneagram 7 because I don't know all of the things about these. So, like, let me go figure out what the genius is within these laws. And then also looking at that aspect of, oh my God, like, we're gonna plan out an entire year of what the topics of Stronger Together are. How am I gonna be okay with any of this? Like, so like for me, like that was one of the most stressful things was, okay, we're gonna plan out this 12-month thing to where I finally was just like, you know what? Here's the topics I like. You figure out where they go. You put them in the order that you feel like they should be in, and I'm just gonna say yes because this over here, planning out a whole year, I don't know how to do that. That's crazy. And this feels like you're sapping my freedom away. So I'm just going to lean into trust as well. Source, God, whatever, is giving you a download of this is the way things should go. And I laugh now when I look back at them and I'm like, this was genius. Like the way these topics, because some of them didn't make sense, by the way. I'm like, I don't understand why
Yep.
this one goes first and not this. Like
Yep.
that logically no sense made whatsoever with the way some of these went. But then watching the way the topics have flowed from last year into this year as well, and how you just get deeper every single time we revisit them and new things come forward, the way they flow is absolutely amazing. And once I got to that place of removing the resistance around 12 years of structured topics is not my flow and leaning into, but why can't it be? Because she's not saying I have to know what I'm going to talk about all 12 months, right? Like there's a topic, and that topic can broadly move into many different areas and things that will be relevant for that year and that month, that you'll just get deeper every single time, but it will always be from a relevant stance because it's not just teach the universal law this month. No, it's talk about the universal law in the context of what the community is experiencing right now. Like what is happening right now within the community, within our environments, within the world for that matter. And how do they fit to the puzzle piece in this timeline? And next year's timeline might look completely different. And I can't wait to see what those topics have morphed into and how deep we've gotten 12 years from now of like, what are we touching now when we talk about the universal law of polarity? Like, how is it feeding into people's lives now? And we've received a ton of feedback from ourselves as well. When I go back and watch them, like, oh my God, that was so genius what she said last year. And then also like tying it back into like how we are further ahead this year and what the new concept around this law is and how you can just live it more authentically and easily rather than I think of like the feminine and masculine, and specific the feminine, the divine feminine aspects topic, and how some people, myself included, in the community were like, oh God, feminine energy. Like, I mean, I can figure it out if I have to, but it is not my natural resting state. Like, this is not where I love to be. To where now this year, I didn't see that resistance from those same community members from last year that were like, oh God, feminine energy, yuck. This year they were like, I think I get it. Like, I think I get it. And more than I think I get it, I think it's useful. Like, I can see the power within that divine feminine energetics that now I'm not really sure why I was so resistant or averse to that specific energy because you know what? Like, my life is easier actually when I am in that feminine flow or allowing of the feminine ability to receive rather than always being in that masculine overdrive, power, force, all of those energies. So I also just love reflecting and looking at the growth of the community and how they too have changed from the years and how these topics, they just mean something different to them now than what they did when they first were introduced to them.
Yeah, the whole topic thing, man, that took a lot of trust on my end too. You're right. Not all of them logically made sense as we were mapping it out. And of course, some self-assigned pressure because I felt as though if it flopped or if it didn't flow well, the onus is on me. I'm going to be feeling pretty responsible. And so I have to admit, every time I've been on a call and you're like, oh, of course, these are the two topics. And look at, the events that are playing out around us or the things that people are navigating through and how perfectly that fits together. And what a great demonstration. I mean, I think it was the last call or it was last month. It was very recently. We had a member share what they were going through. And it was such a perfect example of the topic that to really bring it into the tangible physical reality where when you talk about these spiritual laws, yeah, it is all of the unseen that's going on a plane that you can't necessarily completely map out and cognitively grasp it logically. And so when somebody brings it through in that very seen example of living their day-to-day life, it just makes it so profound and people are so able to identify how then it's playing out in their own life and connect to it that every time it happens, it's about as mind-blowing to me as what you prepare for a call and what I prepare for a call and how wonderfully complementary that it is and how it all fits together. Like there's definitely something grander behind all of what we do and why we came together and how we do it, but it was getting out of my own way with that trust to allow it all to unfold. And that didn't happen year one. Let's be honest. Like it took us some time to be able to navigate through not knowing each other that well, like we talked about. But then as we became friends, I found myself, for instance, really looking to navigate in the beginning quite awkwardly, like a little baby learning to walk and wobbling and falling down and getting back up of how do I identify where the line is between friend and business partner? And to the extent that sometimes I would even approach a conversation of like, hey, as a friend, I want to talk to you about whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, And then also having the business conversations really separate. So maybe we would be on the phone and I would really be dying to know what the update is on some task that we were, focused on for that point of time. But I would hold back and not even share if I had some inspired thought about it because I felt like, well, the business conversations, those should be scheduled. Like, who wants to talk shop when we are just having a friend conversation? Jay, that's who, because she's like up for an adventure at any time. There isn't really that divide for her so much. And so she really allowed me to dissolve the self-imposed boundaries I had built around them and to also dissolve that feeling where if I brought something up, I would be burdening her because I wasn't. And she really embraces even last week. I was talking to her, and she's like, "Oh, I see your pattern of doing this, whatever, over again. Let's just get rid of it." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I did not call you to have you do energy work at, I don't even know, it's like 9 p.m. or something." And she's like, "Well, I just believe that when we find it, we should get rid of it. Why sit in it?" And that's just her approach with like all things. She just greets nearly everything in life with, "Okay, well, here, it's meant to be here. So let's just handle it." And that has been really refreshing for me because I would tend to greet things like, if you're not yet on my to-do list, you would need to go kick rocks for a hot minute or 12. And so if you want to bring up something business related, why don't you go ahead and like schedule that in, shoot me a text. And it's just so much easier to flow through life as things happen like that. Now, don't get me wrong, there needs to be some healthy boundaries, or people in your life will take advantage of that. The beautiful thing is that we're really well boundaried and respectful of each other in a way that it's such an even energy exchange in this approach that it works for us. It might not work for every single listener out there. Again, like the law of rhythm and the flow, it's allowing yourself to live by your design, honoring the other person's design, and finding that happy common rhythm. So please hear me carefully. I'm not telling you just to let go. But again, where I have that much more stringent and rigid personality and paradigm that I'm working through, it's always been so refreshing to be met with the opposite and be able to embrace that because there's a lot of benefit to it. Even though if you had told me that 5 years ago, I probably would have laughed at you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas of growth, like one of many that we've had too, is I do believe that both the business and the friendship was still built on equal and opposite trust, but also acceptance. Like acceptance that that person is coming to me, no matter what it is, in a place of good intention. I don't think I've ever experienced you where I felt like your intentions were bad. Now, that does not mean she didn't irritate the shit out of me and make me mad every once in a while, right? Like those things happen, and I'm sure I did the same to her often as well. But through that, like I learned something with Janessa that I could be both angry and still love that person and still want to hear them out rather than let's fight about it. It was, wow, I feel lit up and triggered. So let's figure out what the energy is around that. And then let's have this conversation because right now, I cannot have this conversation and show up in the way that I want to show up. So I feel this. Let's figure that out before we move forward. So I think there was always a level of honesty and integrity within it too, and even if it was the other person that had to identify it, right? Because sometimes the other person was the one that said, feel some resistance with this, or it seems like something is going on. Let's see what's going on in the energy, and then let's move forward with this conversation. But I do believe foundationally, the good intent has always been present within us. And for me, this is probably the first relationship where I've never felt any sort of poor intent or manipulation or whatever undertone of fuckery there is with some other relationships. I never felt like the judgment even was coming from a bad place. Like I do stuff that I know Janessa would never do. Like I fully have embraced that like the way I do life is not always going to be the way that she would do life and vice versa. But there was never that tone of poor intent or like I'm judging you from the stance of like what is actually wrong with you, like this is crazy. And I can remember many of our conversations too, like both of us I think at different times, but I know I for sure have said like I just have to say, friend me feels this. Like, friend me is so mad about this right now. But like, now let me go back to like practitioner me of like, let's clean up the energy. But I just have to vocalize, friend me is really pissed about whatever this thing is.
Yeah, I think the ability to hold a safe space for whatever came up at any
Mhm.
time has been one of the best traits that we have been able to emulate for each other whenever it was needed. Um, and I think that really came from being so confident in the tools that we had. Like you said, the approach that we would take of, okay, there's a major form of resistance or emotional charge. Let's navigate that and then come back clear-minded to what's at hand versus being in that spun out state and then trying to work through something and finding your logic and rational that's not available in that time. But yeah, I mean, there are many things that like I know you wouldn't do some of the things that I have done or chosen to do either. And sometimes when that's shared either way, I think both of our responses has always been like, thank goodness.
Yeah, whew, because we can't both be doing this weird shit.
Right. Like, I wouldn't want you to do this. This would be really uncomfortable for you with the way that you're wired, or vice versa. Like, I wouldn't make that decision. I wouldn't be able to, sleep at night or like whatever my Enneagram one rigid
Mhm.
integrity, judgy, whatever thinks of things in life sometimes. But I also don't I don't have judgment for you choosing that road for you. I just know that road is not for me.
Mhm.
And I think that is the differentiator that always creates the safe space when we have these conversations of honoring, like, you do you. That's how you do you. Go for you. Go get it. And vice versa. And I'll be here to walk alongside and support you as you venture down that road.
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, that Stronger Together community is so powerfully led because we are very different. Like, we typically would not make the same, we may make the same outcome choice, but likely the way that we get to the outcome is not ever going to be the same path that we would walk. I think there's a lot of aspects of extrovert versus introvert, more internalized processing versus externalized processing, to where no matter the enneatype that's in Stronger Together, you're going to resonate with one of us at different times, probably as well. Of like, hey, not only am I resonating with this person and their choices, but I have so much that I can learn by looking at the alternative person as well. And I think sometimes a lot of the disagreements and the disharmony happens within people because not because they want to have the disharmony, but because they just don't understand how that other person processes or what the intent behind that other person's behavior is actually. I think we make a lot of I think it's this. I assume this person has malintent because of X, but when you learn the enneatypes of the individuals, you start to learn that none of that is typically true. There are some shitty people, but it's not the norm, right? So, like, let's just say that too. Like, there are some people that do for sure have malintent, but the vast majority of the population has no intent to actually cause disharmony or harm another individual. They just process and do life completely differently than the other enneatypes do, to where, yeah, we trigger each other just because we prioritize different things. We move through life differently, to where in that Stronger Together community, you get to see all aspects of that. And not just from Janessa and I, but you get to see the other enneatypes in there too, and how they do life differently. They have different questions, like the sparks of questions that come through there, or the even the advice that comes through from the other individuals within Stronger Together just gives a broader vast understanding and, probably emotional bonding connection too, that we're all learning something new through life. Like none of us actually have it entirely figured out, but you can pluck and see different areas that work, different options that are available to you as well. I mean, I know for sure, like in the beginning, since we're in it right now too, Mercury retrograde probably drove Janessa absolutely insane with me because typically during that time, I was super detached, like disassociation city, like completely internalized in my own little world, trying to process all of those emotions that I had just stored up until the next Mercury retrograde, right? We get four of them a year. So I'm going to have four times of like internally looking at the emotions that I have. Versus now, Mercury retrograde isn't really much different. One thing I have noticed now is Janessa just calls me, right? Like she just calls me when she wants to talk or she just whatever, and then I answer the phone. My problem was like I don't know if this has changed actually. During Mercury retrograde, I just don't reach out to anybody, but it doesn't mean I'm not open to the conversations to where like watching her just be more assertive with the, hey, yo, I need this. Like we got to talk about this, like this is happening or whatever. That's great. Like I can totally do that, but Mercury retrograde for me is so less heavy just because I'm not storing up 4 months worth of emotions and thoughts that I was like, oh, I'll deal with this later. To where Mercury retrograde would hit me hard from a communication aspect just because I would stop talking. I would stop
Yeah.
interacting. I was just gone. Like I was just gone
I know
entirely.
it's really nice to know you're not dead. Like now that I have an understanding of what's happening before, I'm like, I don't, are you dead? Is that why they're like, you're just turned into a ghost? I don't know. Yeah.
No, I
That's
think.
much more in flow too, just knowing your process and how you move through that time. But I do think it's changed where maybe I won't hear back from you quite as quickly, like if you aren't able to pick up when I reach out during Mercury retrograde periods. But it's not the long duration of time of just the communication shutdown that would happen before.
Mhm.
So it's certainly different, I feel like, on my end of the perspective, for sure. I also love that you bring up the introvert extrovert, and I know we're moving toward the top of the hour, so we're going to have to wrap up in just a couple minutes. But I have to say, in my experience at the beginning, whether it would be business meetings that would go on for like hours and hours because we would talk about so much stuff, not business, and just have fun, or phone calls, and I'm like, I don't even know how someone stays on the phone this long. But it's so like recently, I think we had a 4 hour conversation. Both of my earbuds, I mean, each
Died.
one individually lasts like 2 hours, and I killed them both on that conversation. But we were like cleaning and doing whatever we needed to be doing for the day. There was a lot going on. And actually, at the end of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got so much done. This was great. This is better than listening to a podcast, actually. It's fantastic. But also, like, when I'm complete with something, I know that you honor that. Like, I'm not hurting your feelings. Like, okay, it's time. I can't sit any longer. I've got to get up and move. Or I'm just feeling complete with this whole experience. It's time for me to move into my next thing. Like, you're so great about honoring my rhythm as well, which is very different time-wise from yours. Before I move into the summary, is there anything else you want to add? This show flew by.
No, I mean, I think we'll have another show. So if there's anything that comes up, we'll always have another one.
This is true. So, really, if there's one thing that we hope that you take away from today's conversation, is understanding that flow isn't created by finding people who think like you. Like, flow isn't found in a vacuum. You don't need a whole world of sameness to live in flow. And it's created by learning to honor the rhythm that you were designed to bring into the world. So for the longest time, as you've heard, SJ and I feel like thought that our tension and our partnership meant that we needed to be doing things the same way and always moving together in the same direction in the same way. But what we really discovered was something far more powerful. And it was that, we really worked the best together when we honored what each of us brought to the table in our own unique way. So The moment that we really stop trying to make each other lead, create, and work alike, that's what changed everything. And it's not because our differences disappeared. It's just because they became an advantage instead of the source of friction. And that, if you didn't pick up on the vibe today, is exactly what we help people experience inside Stronger Together as well. It's a community where you're not going to be handed some magical algorithm or formula for success or be told who you should become. It's a place where you'll actually discover how you were designed to lead in your life, to create in your life, to contribute in the world, while learning to deeply understand the people you're called to lead and love. So it's more than just understanding yourself. You're starting with yourself is really powerful, but we take it even deeper than that. Imagine feeling less pressure to perform, or feeling less guilt for doing things differently than others, or less comparison, less second guessing yourself. That's pretty powerful. And also imagine having more confidence in your own rhythms, more peace in your relationships, more trust in yourself. I can't even count how many times we talked about trust in this episode. You're also going to find that you have more energy because you're no longer fighting your own design. And really, when people stop competing with one another's rhythms and start collaborating with them, everything changes. And that's the culture that we're building. So, if that sounds like the kind of relationship, business, and life you've been longing for, we'd love to welcome you into the Stronger Together community. And you can grab your seat by visiting www.strongertogetherinstitute.com. Our next live call is this week on Thursday, and we'd love to see you there. And until then, keep your eyes wide open.